One of the most versatile 7.6251 guns in Escape from Tarkov, the M1A is an absolute monster. But there are a lot of attachment options that you can choose from. So today we're going to be talking about modding options and also some recommendations about how to get your best bang for buck when building this absolute monster. Before we get into it today, I want to remind you guys that I stream 5 days a week on Twitch. The link for that will be featured down below if you want to see these builds in action. As always, the screenshots for every single build I'm about to talk about here today will be in the description down below. Now, I want to remind you guys that there's a trade for 10 USBAs from Peacekeeper. However, this Peacekeeper trade is actually really not good value. So once again, I want to remind you that it's not a good deal. A lot of the time you can buy M1As for about 50,000 rubles, which is actually a really good deal for the caliber of gun that it is. Make sure to check the flea market and obviously compare it with the price from the traders. Now for modding, it's really simple. We're going to be switching over to the SOCOM threaded muzzle brake, and we're going to be putting an Atlas compensator on. Now there are a lot of different choices between the Lantac Dragon here, which is about 14,000 rubles here if you can buy from traders. However, if you can't, you can actually buy the muzzle brake Odinworks Atlas, which is actually slightly cheaper here and only 1% recoil worse. So I'm going to actually be choosing this one here today. As we jump into the scope choice, now you got multiple different options. Obviously, you can mount a laser. But however, I know a lot of people are sleeping on the Holosun here. But if you mount it at the front of your gun, the field of view is actually quite nice on the scope. And a lot of people don't really get down with the scope, but it also has a built-in laser and it's incredibly cheap. Now, if we look at the laser and also the scope when it's at the front of the gun, it's definitely less intrusive. Now, once again, the M1A definitely thrives at range. So we're going to be jumping straight into the ARMS 18 mount, which is the cheaper mount here. However, it can't take 30mm rails. But if we look at stuff like the Elcan, I want to remind you guys that when you buy scopes, you can actually find scopes cheaper sometimes when they are the FDE variant. And when you look at stuff here, like also the NC Star is also a good option, as well as the Contact Prism. Now, the Contact Prism is actually an amazing scope and is incredibly cheap as well. This cheap bang for buck M1A comes in about 86,000 rubles, including the gun, which is actually really incredible. Now, this is obviously isn't including ammo and mags, but that is incredibly powerful with how important the round is in Escape from Tarkov. So we're going to be extending to the 22-inch barrel from the 16-inch standard. Now, this is actually a really important decision that you can make, and it gives you the ability to mount the Lantac Dragon and also the adapter. So we're going to be slapping the thread adapter, the Lantac Dragon, and the blast mitigation device. This is the best bang for buck compensator at the end here and just gives you incredible recoil. We're also going to be jumping straight into the ARMS A18 mount. And once again, I'm going to be recommending a few scopes here, but a personal favorite of mine for a decent price is the Elcan, which is a pretty ugly looking scope, but it really gets the job done and really complements the M1A at range. Obviously, you got a choice between, you know, the SOCOM stock or maybe the Archangel. And if you look at the stats, you gain about 12 ergo, a decent chunk of recoil as well when you pay for this. And if you buy it from people on the flea market, you can get it for around 20,000 rubles and sometimes lower. It's definitely worth the money, but obviously, guys, if you can't buy it at the time for a good price, then don't bother. If you guys are enjoying this video so far, feel free to subscribe. As always, guys, we'll be working on more gun build guides. Let me know in the comments down below what gun you'd like to see next, and I may consider it for the next video. As we look at the build here, though, however, guys, we're going to be looking at about 84,000 rubles, not including the gun. If you want to go suppressed, we've actually done some comparisons here, but the best bang for buck suppressor is actually going to be the Thunder Beast. Now, I checked out all the different suppressors, but unfortunately, the others are either really bad statistically wise or just too expensive. So Thunder Beast 308 is actually going to be your best bang for buck option here, coming at around negative 9% recoil. Now, when we look at them all side by side, once again, I want to remind you that Thunder Beast is actually the cheapest, coming around 33,000 rubles for the entire thing, including the compensator. However, when you look at things like the Daniel Wave suppressor or also the SDN, you know, they can be about 50,000, about 40,000 rubles. And that's not including the compensator. So, you know, these are sacrifices you have to make. And if you die, they're more likely to take it. Now, as we jump into the meta build, I just want to remind you guys that this gun is gloriously overkill. Now, this is probably one of the most OP guns at Escape from Tarkov. Starting off with the MOE pistol grip, you got a choice between the 10 or the FDE. Just buy whichever one's cheapest at the time. Slapping on the MESA hydraulic buffer tube and straight into the HKE1. Now you got a choice between that or the PRS or other stocks here, but usually I'd go for the recoil option, slapping on an M-bus for that extra ergo and obviously extending the barrel. Now for the compensator, we're going to be jumping straight into the Lentac thread adapter, straight into the blast mitigation and also the Lentac compensator, as this gives us the best recoil reduction. Now for the grip, however, some people are going to say the RK2. However, the problem with the RK2 is I feel like the higher the ergo, the more the M1A thrives. You really want to be thinking about ergo, not just recoil when building DMRs. So I'm actually going to recommend the Fortis Shift over the RK1 for my build in my personal preference. This is such a beast of a gun anyway. When we look at the different options between the pistol grips, obviously you can save a lot of money if you don't go for the Mo, because they are only available on the fleet and sometimes are jacked about 50,000 or higher rubles. When it comes to the mount, you don't actually need one and you can put any sort of scope you want on there. My personal favorite scope would be the Voodoo. If you slap the 30mm mount on and then slap the Voodoo in that, it gives you awesome one times and also a really good reach if you need to do long range shooting. The Voodoo is definitely one of my favorite scopes. Now, well, a lot of you may be thinking, why would you spend so much on a gun? Something like this M1A, you're thinking, why would I spend so much on this gun when I could really just get the same thing for a lot less? And that is actually really interesting, and people have been asking me to do this for some time, but that actually affects more than you realize. The lower the recoil of a DMR, the faster the reset time of each shot, and also the less distance the barrel actually rises between each individual shot. Now, once again, guys, if you want to jump into suppressor, it's going to be the Daniel Wave suppressor, whether that's the 7.62 compensator with the suppressor over the top. Now, when we look at what I was talking about with recoil in person, we're going to be looking at the budget build, and I want you guys to look at how high the barrel actually jumps after each individual shot. And you're going to be noticing that it actually clears well above the head of the target for each shot, and the time for it to reset is actually longer. So when you are buying all these attachments, you are essentially spending money to ensure that you can nail someone time and time again, shot after shot. The more you spend on the recoil, the faster the reset and the lower the distance. When we look at the difference between the mid-tier and then finally the meta, you're going to be noticing probably about a foot less of recoil there. And the time to reset is also faster. So obviously these are choices you have to make, but with the budget gun, you notice that if you time your shots right, there is virtually no recoil anyway. So once again, when we look at the mid-tier, the time between shots is actually incredibly less between the reset. So this is essentially what you're paying for with DMRs. And when it gets down to the meta M1A, I can just go ahead and spam this thing for all hell, and you're going to notice that it's going to actually be really tight on the target anyway. So that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed this in any single way, feel free to like and subscribe for further videos. As always, guys, I'll be working on more of these. Let me know in the comments which one you'd like to see next. And as always, we'll see you on the next one.